Hello and welcome back to the Sports 2.0 show. I'm your host, Jaya Williams, here with Ryan, Will, and Aaron. How are we feeling today, guys?
Doing good. Excited to talk about the NBA free agency today.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I had to rush back from my car was getting serviced on. That's why I was slightly late getting onto the production. But I'm doing pretty good. Got my car fixed up today. Had a nice parlay power hour earlier with Tanner. Grant was missing out. Grant's on a trip to Colorado. But I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to talk about some NBA free agency. It's been pretty wild.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's can't complain. Thank you, Jaya.
Well, I'm glad that Grant's in my hometown of Colorado. Glad you fixed your car issues. We're all gathered here today to talk about this free agency. Obviously, these deals have been really heating up through these first 2 days. So let's just go ahead and talk about some of the newest updates. One of the biggest things everyone's been buzzing about is Kyle Lowry joining the Miami Heat. What does this addition mean for the franchise? And was this really the right move? As you guys know, he's now going to be the newest starting guard for the Heat, and he's on a 3-year deal with them. So how do we think his addition will contribute to the dynamic of the Heat? Aaron, we'll start with you.
I think it's a great signing for the Heat. Obviously, the Pelicans are also looking very much into him. They did a great trade with not great trade. They traded Bledsoe and Steven Adams to the Grizzlies, trying to get him, but didn't work out for them. Lowry and Butler are good friends, so I think it's a really good addition for them. They traded to sign and trade, bringing Dragic to the Raptors, who I think can help that team out also. But I think it's a really good addition to the team. Have a player who's won an NBA championship added to the roster and getting it's an older team around Jimmy Butler, having another superstar, and then Bam Adebayo, obviously a rising superstar, bringing back Duncan Robinson for another year. And so I think, and PJ Tucker got added to the Heat also. So I think Kyle Lowry saw all these signings the Heat were making and decided to go to the Heat. And I think it's going to be a great move for him moving down to South Beach.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, with those 3 All-Stars you mentioned, Butler, Bam Adebayo, and then obviously we have Tyler Herro coming off the bench, Duncan Robinson. Will, are you with Aaron here? Do you think this was a good move for the Heat?
This is the right move for them. They add a guard that can play some solid defense, score the ball when he needs to. He can play make, and he can take some of the weight off the shoulders of guys like Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. Aaron also mentioned it, a 5-year, $90 million contract for Duncan Robinson, the highest contract for an undrafted free agent ever in NBA history. They also added PJ Tucker, so that means they can roll out a lineup now of Kyle Lowry, maybe Duncan Robinson at the 2, Jimmy Butler at the 3, PJ at the 4, and Bam Adebayo at the 5, which would be a very solid defensive group. You mentioned it also, Jay, they can bring Tyler Herro off the bench as a 6th man. So I think the Heat are really building something here that could be a nice contender in the East.
And Ryan, are you with them? Do you think that there will be good contenders with this new starting lineup?
I like the addition of Kyle Lowry a lot. I think he fits right into the Heat culture. He's a great spot-up shooter. I think he's going to take off pressure off Jimmy Butler as well. I think the reason why the Heat had so much success in the bubble, which doesn't get talked about enough, is that Goran Dragic was playing so well that Jimmy Butler wasn't forced to do all the heavy lifting. And once Dragic went down and he never really looked the same, the Heat struggled and got bounced out of the first round. So I think Kyle Lowry is definitely an upgrade from Dragic. The one thing I will say, though, is that he does have a little bit of an injury history and he is getting up there in age. And they did sign him for $90 million. So it's kind of a risk giving a guy who is past his prime $90 million. But the NBA is different now. Maybe 5-6 years ago would have been overpaying. But to be honest with you, I don't know what's overpaying looking at some of these other contracts we're talking about later on. So.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I don't think overpaying is really in the NBA's vocabulary with some of these deals that we've been seeing. But I do see what you're saying. He is a little bit older, out of his prime, but I'm with you guys. I think this is a great move and definitely a big step up from Dragic. So we'll be interested to see what happens with the Heat, but they're not the only team that's added a big addition. The Lakers, a lot of people have been talking about that one as well. Carmelo Anthony, as you guys know, has signed a 1-year contract with them. At 37 years old, he was with the Blazers for the last 2 seasons, and then there he averaged 13.4 points and 3.1 rebounds. What do you guys think? Where does Carmelo Anthony fit among all of these Lakers additions and, their big three? What do you think, Aaron?
I was sort of shocked by the signing, to be honest, because they got already a third member of their big three, who's a good scorer, and Russell Westbrook obviously is also a great facilitator, averages a triple-double almost every year. Not always up there, but something like that. So having LeBron and AD and now Russell Westbrook as 3 very capable scorers, I was shocked by Melo. He'll be coming off the bench, probably leading the second unit, so I think it's going to be better than I think. And they lost some good scorers off the bench in Schroeder because they're not re-signing him, it seems like. And Alex Caruso left the team. So I'm a little shocked by getting a power forward, you could say. I thought they'd probably be targeting more of a guard who could score more off the bench because of how good their big men are. But I'm not mad at this signing. I hope Carmelo can win a championship because he's one of the best of our generation. But you'll see how it goes for him. I think it's just a signing for him to try to win a championship and be able to live in LA. So, yeah.
Fair. Will, we'll go to you now. Aaron, you're not the only one who is kind of surprised about, this signing. Why do you think they were motivated to go ahead and get Carmelo, and was it necessary? What do you think, Will?
One thing I like to point out here is, obviously Carmelo is great friends with LeBron, so that made that signing very easy for him. Aaron mentioned it. It's in LA. No one really complains about going into LA. It's a big market team. He'll get a lot of attention there. But he'll probably come off the bench as one of the best shooters in this Lakers lineup. After getting Russell Westbrook, they really don't have a lot of guys in that starting lineup who are consistent three-point shooters. Russell Westbrook can hit the occasional three-pointer. Obviously, LeBron can hit the occasional one, and so can Anthony Davis. But they don't really have a lot of strong guys that can hit the three-pointer. They added Wayne Ellington. They added a few other guys. Kent Bazemore can shoot three occasionally. So they added a few guys that can shoot threes, but no one are really consistent. Carmelo might have to be that consistent three-point shooter off the bench. So I think that's where he'll slide in. I think it's a necessary signing for the Lakers. They just need more scoring off of that bench, as Aaron mentioned. It'll probably be Carmelo and Talon Horton-Tucker, THT, leading the way on the offensive end off the bench. And I think that can work out for them well.
Yeah, definitely shooting is going to be a huge advantage with having Carmelo Anthony there for the Lakers. Ryan, what do you think? Where do you think Carmelo Anthony is really going to fit among all of their other Lakers additions?
I think he's going to have a similar role like he did on the Blazers. Obviously, he's not going to get as many shots as he did on the Blazers just because the Lakers have 3 stars instead of 2 like Portland did in Lillard and CJ McCollum. But I see, Frank Vogel putting him in, coming off the bench with some of the bench guys and him kind of leading the group and scoring and, galvanizing the team. From a personal perspective, I'm very happy for him. I think you look at him 2 years ago, after he was released from the Rockets, he was pretty much out of the league and everyone pretty much wrote him off and thought he was done. But when the Blazers signed him, he's been playing pretty well, especially last year in the playoffs. He had a game where he was on fire against his former team in Denver. So I really like the signing. I think he's going to provide some good scoring off the bench, some leadership. And I don't have any worries about him, not wanting to come off the bench because I think he's humbled himself enough to the point where it's all about winning for him. And I agree with Aaron. I think he's going to do some great things for the Lakers. So I like the signing. Talking about the other signings, one Lakers signing that we didn't even mention was bringing back Trevor Ariza. As a Lakers fan, I love that. He was a fan favorite. I've been waiting for him to come back for the team for a long time. He played pretty well for the Heat too last year. I think he's an underrated shooter, can light it up from the outside. And he definitely provides leadership, championship experience, defense. So I like that signing as well. Bringing back Dwight, I think, was a good signing too. Anthony Davis does have an injury history, unfortunately, and Marc Gasol is pretty up there in age. So I think Dwight Howard will definitely be a good spark off the bench. And guys like Ellington and Kemp Bazemore, I'm not sure where they fit in. I do like the signing of Malik Monk. I think he had a little bit of a breakout year last year. He was pretty good off the bench, and I don't know if you guys picked this up, but he has shot, I believe, like almost 40% from the 3-point line. So I think that's an underrated signing as well.
Yeah, definitely a lot of really smart moves from the Lakers here. Will and Aaron, how are you feeling about the Lakers in general? Me personally, I really like Malik Monk and Trevor Reeves. I think those were two of their it's going to be two really great strengths, like Ryan mentioned. How are you guys feeling about that?
Yeah,
you go first. You go first.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of blanked out Malik Monk from my mind because I kind of forget he's a player in the NBA at some points, but he is a very solid player. He can score, but he happened to play for the Hornets for the majority of his career, which just doesn't really help his name get out there. But I also think that's a great addition. Like Carmelo, he'll be good from the 3-point line. Trevor Ariza, I think he's also pretty solid. He can be an inconsistent shooter, but he's a lengthy guy. He can be a good defender off the bench, so I don't mind that either. Plus, he's back in LA where he won that championship all those years ago with Kobe Bryant when he was a youngster in the NBA. So I don't mind those two additions. I really like the Lakers this year. I think they bounce back. People are saying their championship in the bubble was a fluke. I just don't think that's the case. They're a very, very good team.
I think the Lakers are a good team. I think the addition of Carmelo is really big. But we haven't even mentioned, I think, one of the bigger signings from off the bench. It's not a big contract. It's 2-year, $10 million with Kendrick Nunn. He had bigger offers on the table, and I think he'll be the other big scorer off the bench with Carmelo Anthony. You know, he really likes to shoot the ball a lot. He's not always the best capable scorer, but he was third in Rookie of the Year voting a few years ago and was undrafted free agent that year. So that was pretty incredible for him. So I think that's going to be Kendrick Nunn will be the biggest signing besides Carmelo. Even bigger signing than Carmelo off the bench for them potentially. He'll maybe be playing a 6-man minutes. So yeah, I think we're going to go talk over to another team now. We just talked about the Lakers. Let's go speak over to the Bulls. You want to start that off,
Yes.
Ryan, or whoever, Ryan or Jaya, whoever wants to speak about this?
Yeah, the Chicago Bulls has done quite a bit. They have just reached a deal with DeMar DeRozan for 3 years, $85 million deal. Obviously, Lonzo Ball's the biggest headline. 4-year contract with him for $85 million, and Alex Caruso, 4 years as well for $37 million. So the Bulls are looking really solid, especially with Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, and DeMar DeRozan. A lot of people are thinking they could be a really big threat. So I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are about it. Do you think the Chicago Bulls are now a top contender in the East with this kind of revamped roster? Ryan, we'll start with you. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think if they're lucky, they'll win one playoff series and get bounced out in the second round. But I think even that's a stretch. I see them going home in the first round. But making it to the playoffs after years of misery is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm not as high as on Lonzo Ball as everyone else is. I think he has a great IQ. He's a good passer. He's a great defender. But in today's NBA, you have to be able to shoot the ball. Look at Ben Simmons. Look how much scrutiny he's gotten. He's a great player, but the 76ers were trying to trade him for a while, and they can't get Harden-esque value if the guy can't shoot, and that's why they decided not to keep him. So I think Lonzo Ball does have a good ceiling, but if he can't shoot consistently from the outside, then there's only so far up he can go. But I do like Vucevic on the team. I really like Zach LaVine. I think those are two great players. And DeMar DeRozan is also a great scorer. I'm just a little confused how DeRozan and LaVine will fit together. But I think they will be a playoff team. I just don't see them going very far in the playoffs.
I'm going to jump right in right now. I totally disagree with that Lonzo Ball 3-point nonsense. He literally shot his best 3-point percentage in his career last year, shooting over 8.5 threes a game also. He was the best 3-point shooter, arguably, on the Pelicans. I don't know if you watched enough Pelicans games this year, but he has improved his 3-point. He's a great defender. I was shocked by the value because he hasn't done that much. The like, I don't know if 21 million a year is that much of a value for him. I'm a fan of his, but the 3-point slander is not him anymore. Obviously, he had that ugly shot back in the day. He's changed it up a bit. But his 3-point is definitely up there. I was shocked by that signing. I thought Kobe White's a great point guard for them. Obviously not a great passer, more of a scorer. Kobe White will be a good addition off the bench, but I don't see them winning that much in the playoffs. But I think they'll have a great big three of Zach LaVine, Vucevic, and DeRozan. And Lonzo will be a great 3-point shooter, probably be sitting in the corner and trying to get these assists. Over to you now, though, Will.
I don't know if he'll be like a stellar 3-point shooter, but I think he'll be able to drop in a few a game. But I do think this Bulls team will be good enough to make the playoffs. But like you guys, I'm not sure if they'll make it very far. This is a league led by big threes. And if we're looking at Eastern Conference big threes, theirs falls just short of teams like the Nets. They fall short of the Bucks simply because of Giannis. They fall short of some other teams. You can maybe put the Heat above them with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and now Kyle Lowry. So this is a league of big threes like that. And I'm not too high on the DeRozan, LaVine, Vucevic trio. I'm with Ryan here. I'm not totally sure how the dynamic is going to work between Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. They have somewhat similar play styles. Zach LaVine is much better at shooting the three-pointer. He takes a lot of three-point shots. DeMar DeRozan shies away from that. He's more of a mid-range shooter, but they both like to take it to the basket quite a bit. Kobe White now coming off the bench will be a little interesting. And Patrick Williams, where is he going to fit in? Is he going to play at the 4 now, or is he going to come off the bench at the 3? I'm not sure, but there's still some question marks I have there for this Bulls team, so I'm not totally sure they can make a deep run.
Okay, so it seems like not everyone's fully sold on them being top contenders. I think so too. I think they're definitely in a lot better shape. They will be a playoff team if you ask me, but I think time will really only tell the dynamic of all these guys. We've never really seen them come together, so it will be interesting to see. I think there will be a few inconsistencies, especially with when they're up against, like you said, people like the Nets, Bucks. I would put the Heat above them as well. So they're in better shape, but I wouldn't go ahead and say that they're about to come in and dominate. This revamped roster will definitely help their chances, though. If we're moving on to a different team, though, this news just came in this morning, actually, for the Knicks. Kemba Walker, the 4-time NBA All-Star, is now going to be joining the New York Knicks. Excuse me. A lot of people have interesting feelings about this. Aaron, do you think Kemba Walker is a valuable addition to the Knicks, and what do you think him coming in is going to do for the franchise?
I do like the sign. He's going back home to New York, which is good for him. He was in Boston a few years before that. Boston, New York always have one of the biggest rivalries in sports, which will be fun to watch as a fan when they battle against each other. I think it's a good signing for the Knicks. He obviously had a little bit of an off year last year with the Celtics, and that's why he got traded to the Thunder, who bought them out. I think it'll be a good addition. I think Derrick Rose now coming off the bench more will be much better for the New York Knicks. I think the signing of Evan Fournier also for the Knicks is very, very underrated signing. I think he's a very capable scorer. I think Kemba and him will be two great scorers who will be playing the 1 and 2 probably mainly for them. And with RJ Barrett, who is still getting better and better playing the 3, I think the Knicks are going to be a playoff team. And I think they can battle for maybe a 4 or 5 seed. And I also think they signed they re-signed Reggie Bullock, and they got Taj Gibson back. So they re-signed some good players that are very good in Tom Thibodeau team. So I really like the additions and this team they already had. So I think they could be battling for a 4, maybe 4 or 5 seed area potentially.
Definitely. And Will, are you with Aaron? Do you think that this was a really good move for the Knicks?
I like Kemba Walker, but I think the guard room in New York is getting a little overcrowded with all those guys. Kemba Walker, Derrick Rose, RJ Barrett still in there. They have a lot of guys that they need to give playing time to, and that are quality players that might hurt the dynamic there. They had a good thing going last year. Obviously, it wasn't good enough to make it that far in the playoffs, but I like the dynamic that they moved Derrick Rose to the starting lineup at a few points last year during the playoffs. It worked out for them. RJ Barrett showed that he has the potential to be a very capable scorer. But I do like Evan Fournier. However, off the bench, he could be very, very solid as a scorer. We've seen him put up big numbers for the Magic in past years. He spent most of his career there. He's been a very good scorer for them in what has been a bad long time coming for the Magic after Dwight Howard left. So he's been very solid. I'm not like the Bulls. I'm not completely sold on the Knicks being able to compete when they get into the deeper rounds of the Eastern Conference, when they have to go up against those Nets and the Bucks. So I'm not completely sold on them, but I do like Kemba Walker overall.
And Ryan, how are you feeling about this?
I'm not too high on this signing, to be honest. Kemba Walker coming out of Charlotte, I think, was a different player than he is coming out of Boston. He's been hit with so many injuries, and he can't stay healthy. So if you can't stay healthy, there's not much you can add to the team. Obviously, if he's on the sidelines, I hope he stays healthy, and I hope he plays well. But I think being in Boston and taking a back seat to guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are younger than him, I think kind of hurt his psyche, to be honest, because he was a man in Charlotte, and he was supposed to be the guy to come to Boston to kind of lift that team, and he wasn't able to. We'll see how he does with Tom Thibodeau. I could see them having a good dynamic, but like I said, he's injury prone. And the Knicks had something good going last year, like Will, and I think Derrick Rose is actually a better player right now than Kemba Walker, if you ask me. I know it's a statement, but I would tend to play Derrick Rose more minutes than Kemba Walker.
That's a very interesting take, but I can kind of see your point. I think this will be a very good fresh start for Walker, and it will be a test just to kind of see what this dynamic is and what it has to hold. But overall, I do like this. I think that he's going to be a good addition for the Knicks, kind of put them back in the game a little bit. But like you guys said, compared to all these other Eastern contenders, I'm not so sure they're going to be able to excel. Time will tell, but we cannot have this discussion without talking about one of the biggest things in the headlines right now. Steph Curry has gotten a $215 million extension with the Warriors. He is now locked in with them until the 2025-2026 season. And this makes him the only person to sign two $200 million plus contracts. Pretty insane. Guys, what are we thinking about Steph Curry doing this extension? What does it mean for the Warriors' future? And how do you feel about this $200+ million extension? Ryan, we'll go ahead and start with you again. What are you thinking?
Well, if anyone deserves over $200 million, I guess you can give it to the best shooter of all time. So I'm definitely not mad at the signing. I think he's obviously one of the best players in the NBA. Even though people are saying he's getting a little older, I think he's still in his prime. He proved it last year. The one concern I have about Curry is him staying healthy. But last year he was able to, and he had a great season. With Klay Thompson coming back, I see the Warriors contending in the West. But yeah, like I said, you definitely can't get upset if you're a Warriors fan. He's been with the team ever since he was drafted in 09. And he's been the face of the franchise. I'm just happy to see a guy who's been drafted by a team stay with the team his entire career. And I don't see Curry ever leaving the Warriors. So I'm happy for him, happy for the Warriors, and definitely don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, definitely Curry is the face of that Warriors franchise, so it would be difficult to picture him anywhere else. I'm not surprised that he did this, but what about you, Will? How are you feeling about this extension?
Yeah, this is a good deal, and it was a necessary deal. Steph Curry cannot leave the Warriors. He's the face of their franchise. He's probably the face of their whole history. He's been their best player probably all time. And like Ryan, I also do believe that with Klay Thompson coming back, they drafted Jonathan Kuminga early in the draft. They also got Moses Moody. This team is retooled into a team that can be another championship contender in the West. We kind of forget how good the Warriors were when Klay Thompson was there. Steph Curry had his injuries. Klay Thompson's been out for a whole year now. They're going to be a good team again. James Wiseman is going to get better. Draymond Green's going to play like Draymond Green. So this Warriors team is going to be good, and I have no quarrels with this contract.
Yeah, they're definitely looking very solid, high expectations for them, and I don't think Steph is anywhere out of his prime just yet. Aaron, what are you thinking, and how are you feeling about this $200 million extension?
It's obviously the new NBA. That's how these huge superstars, faces of the NBA, get this amount of money. So I'm fine with it in that sense. And I loved what Ryan was saying that he's going to stay with his team the whole career. I love when that happens. I'm not a huge fan of all these teams, players jumping around all the time, but I think it's amazing. It's a great signing, well worth for the Warriors. He had arguably his best season of his career in the regular season last year, averaging 32 a game and could have been MVP if he played all 82 games, or at least 75 or 80. He only played about 60 games, so he was off on that part. But a lot of people wanted him to be MVP. Jokic ended up beating him, and I think his signing will be good. And I think the Warriors overall will be a good team. I like the additions of Kuminga a lot, Moody a lot, and I think still having Wiggins, Klay Thompson, if he can come back, hopefully he can for the Warriors. And Draymond Green just needs to play like a gritty defender like he always has, and maybe average close to triple-double for the team.
Yeah, definitely looking pretty solid. And shout out to Steph Curry's agent, because doing that twice is no easy task. And that's pretty incredible for him to be the first person to ever accomplish that. But now that we've kind of talked about where everybody is at so far, there are still some free agents remaining. So I want to know your guys' thoughts on the people that we need to still be looking out for. Ryan, we'll go to you. Who do you think is some of the top remaining free agents right now?
I think Kelly Oubre is a great piece for a contending team off the bench. He had a little off year with the Warriors last year, but in Phoenix he was great. I think whoever gets him will be lucky because he's very versatile. He can shoot the three. He's very athletic. He can attack the basket. He's a good defender. I think he's a good free agent. I also really like Josh Hart. I'm not sure why he hasn't been signed yet. He's can shoot the ball, play great defense. He's tough as nails. I see him as like fitting into the Heat or the Lakers, or and even like a young team who has, or like Portland, who can't stop anyone on defense. He can come off the bench and lock down some guys. I'm not sure why he hasn't been signed yet either. One other guy that I really like is, sorry, 1 second. Go ahead, Will. I'll get back to you on my last signing that I like.
Sure. Will, what free agents are you looking out for? Are they the same ones or somebody else?
Yeah, I like the ones they named. Josh Hart's a solid player, but I'm looking at Dennis Schroeder. He did have a questionable playoff run with the Lakers, but he's still a very quality point guard in the NBA. He can score the ball with the best of them, so he needs to be picked up somewhere. He can add some very necessary scoring off the bench for any team. And I'm also looking at Victor Oladipo. He's has some injury issues. He's still recovering, but when Victor Oladipo was his most improved player, was an all-star, he's a very capable player in the NBA. He's a great defender, and I think if he's able to kind of muster off and come back from those injuries, he can be a very good player for some team, and they can probably get him for the veteran minimum. He's fallen off of a cliff due to his injuries, and his value is taking a downfall. So some team can get him for very good value.
Yeah, definitely Victor Oladipo is on my watch list. Will, where do you think would be a good fit for him? Should a team pick him up somewhere?
With his skill set, I wouldn't have minded him going back to Miami, but with Miami picking up Kyle Lowry, that doesn't really work out for him too well. And I don't think they'd be really favorable in doing that because of him suffering that injury basically as soon as he got there. So I'm not sure they'll be a big fan of that. But out of the teams any team could afford him on a veteran minimum contract. Maybe the Bucks might want to give him a go. I think that would probably be a decent fit. He can slide in there right behind Drew Holiday as a very solid guard off the bench and keep that defensive rolling there. So I think the Bucks should give him a good look. And basically any other team that's looking for guard play. My hometown Wizards are looking for guards, but I'm not sure if they're interested in Victor Oladipo, who's coming off of all those injuries. But I wouldn't mind him coming to Washington, D.C.
Definitely. And Aaron, what about you? What top free agents left are you looking out for the most?
Personally, we haven't talked about Kawhi Leonard yet. He'll probably be re-signing, it seems like, in the Clippers, and he's a top 10 player in the league. You could argue top 5 if you really want to. So he'll obviously is the one to watch out for. Doesn't seem like he's going to be leaving, though. So I'm not going to talk about him that long. But Spencer Dinwiddie is one also. He's been out for the last year, 2 years from the Nets. He's a free agent. He almost got traded to the Rockets in the James Harden trade. Seems like right now he's most likely going to the Wizards by the reports. They need a new point guard. So that'll be a good addition for them. But a few players I like are Danny Green and JJ Redick, getting some older players that have great 3-point quality to teams that need it, maybe like the Nuggets or the Jazz off the bench, maybe the Lakers as well. Get like those very good teams, good scorers off the bench. Maybe not the Jazz, they have some good scorers already. But yeah, there's also Lauri Markkanen, who's still only 24 years old. I don't think the Bulls will be re-signing him after all these big deals. I think he's a very capable scorer, 3-point shooter. He needs to still work on his defending and rebounding a little more, but I think he's going to be a very capable scorer and a very underrated signing. And lastly, Reggie Jackson, was never really the biggest fan of him. Always thought he was too much of a shooter when he wasn't the best player on the court, but he showed how good he was in the playoffs of the Clippers, scoring a good amount of points, probably being a third option. So he's a free agent. I think he should be re-signing with the Clippers also, like Kawhi Leonard, but I think he's a very underrated player out there for a team that needs a scorer off the bench or even starter.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Reggie Jackson, definitely very underrated. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I think nobody's really impressed about Kawhi. He'll be just fine. Aaron, Ryan, did you go ahead and remember the last player that you wanted to bring up?
Yes, Lou Williams. He played great for the Hawks last season. I'm not sure why the Hawks haven't re-signed him. He was a great fit with the team. He was back home in his hometown. I think he was a very underrated piece for them in their run last year. If he doesn't re-sign with the Hawks, I could see him going to a team maybe like the Nuggets or the Suns even, just to get some scoring off the bench. Yes, campaign has played great for them, for the Suns. But if you look at a team like the Nuggets, like Jamal Murray tore his knee last year, so I'm not sure if he's going to be ready to start the season, and he could be limited. So, I think they need some scoring off the bench. So I like those two teams. If not,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see Lou Will out on one of those Western teams. I feel like I see him just staying in with the Hawks. I think that's what most likely will happen, but should he leave, I do kind of like the idea of him going to the Nuggets. But before we leave you guys here, we've got to talk about overall, what do we think are some of the best and worst value contracts, and what are some strange signings? Aaron, I know you had some strong feelings about Drummond, so do you want to go ahead and top us off with some odd signings and any contracts that you think were high or low value?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some weird signings. Andre Drummond is who I really wanted to talk about. He was an all-star, led the league at rebounds for 4 straight years, joined the Lakers, barely played, and now is going to back up arguably the best center of the league for the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid, only signing a 1 year. He's still 27 years old, very capable player. I'm shocked by him going there. I feel like there was so many other teams that could have potentially been pushing for him, needed a center. I'm still shocked. I don't know if he just wants to win. Most people know that Doc Rivers is not the best in the playoffs, and him getting game time might not be the highest there. So I thought he'd maybe be going somewhere that a team would need a center more. Obviously, there's a lot of good centers in the league, but I still think people could think he's top 10, 15 center, and how good of a rebounder he is, that's super important in today's NBA.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising. Will, how are you feeling about this Drummond decision?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. He's swapping roles with Dwight Howard, basically. Dwight Howard going back to LA and Drummond going to Philly. So they're basically occupying the same roles that each other were playing in the past seasons. But I'm with Aaron. I think it's a little bit of a weird fit. He's going to have to come off the bench, obviously, behind Joel Embiid. They both can't be on the floor at the same time. Essentially, Drummond's a big guy that will dominate the paint down low, and Joel Embiid is going to play that same way. Joel Embiid does stretch the floor occasionally, but he's a dominant paint presence, and you can't run these two guys together, so I'm not sure if it really meshes well for the 76ers. But One move that I thought was kind of weird that we already talked about was the Evan Fournier to the Knicks. Yeah, he's a good scorer, but with the guard play, as I mentioned before, that they have there in New York, I'm not sure if it really works out. Derrick Rose is already one of the better scorers off the bench in the NBA. He could have. He was up for Sixth Man of the Year last year. He was a very solid player. RJ Barrett is a great guard scorer. They're bringing in Kemba Walker now. Obviously, Kemba Walker was signed after Evan Fournier, but now with all these deals coming together, I'm just not sure if it's a great fit. So I think that one's a little weird in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree that both of those were pretty strange. Drummond and Fournier. Ryan, we'll let you get the last words here. How do you think these two will be effective, and what do you think these trades are really about?
So Andre Drummond, I think, was a good risk for the 76ers. I mean, like, he had an off year last year. He was bought out from the Cavs. Didn't really get to play much with the Lakers. I think he's still a capable player. So it's definitely a good risk for the 76ers. I do think, though, Drummond should have gone to a team where he could get more playing time. So that was a little strange. Evan Fournier, to be honest with you, he did play great for the Magic, but I mean, who do the Magic have? So I mean, like, someone had to score. He went to Boston, got COVID, obviously struggled. So I'm not going to hold that against him, but I think his value, like, coming from the Magic, was a lot higher than it actually is. I do think he could provide some good scoring off the bench for the Knicks, but I don't view it as a huge deal. One signing that I did want to talk about, which was a big head scratcher, was Doug McDermott signing with the Spurs for 3 years, $42 million. Not sure what
I would like to disagree.
Not sure what Doug McDermott has done. I believe he's averaged single digits his entire career. Not much of a defender. If anyone would like to please explain to me, I really.
He had his best year last year. I think Will seems much more knowledgeable by him just saying he'll disagree right there. So I'll let him discuss it. But I know he had his best year of his career last year.
Yeah, he did. I believe he did reach double-digit points for that matter. If you wanted to check that out, Ryan. But he was a very solid player off the bench last year for Indiana. He's a great three-point shooter, which the Spurs have never been known for doing. Greg Popovich has been a big mid-range post and defensive coach. And I think he's changing up things. I would actually put this under the underrated signings. I know it's a lot of money for someone like Doug McDermott, but I think he can be a very capable scorer for this team. He can change up the mindset of Greg Popovich and trying to move it towards a three-point game, which is what the NBA is moving towards. You can't have a good team without three-point shooting, which is why the Spurs fell off like they did. I mean, obviously, they lost all their big-time players like Tim Duncan and all those guys, which is the biggest reason they fell off. But, I mean, I think he's a very good player. He hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time. If you look at the time that he spent with New York, the time he spent with Chicago, and the time he spent with OKC, he really wasn't getting all the playing time that he could have. He put up a lot of 20-point games last year for Indiana when he was put into the starting lineup after guys like TJ Warren were out for the whole year. So I think he can be a very capable player for the Spurs. The money is a little bit questionable with his past seasons. So I understand where you're coming from there. 3 years, $42 million is a lot for Doug McDermott, especially when you're looking at someone like Caruso getting 4 years, $37 million. I guess you could put them both on the same page. I'm not a big fan of that Caruso contract either, but it is a lot of money. But I think he can be a pretty solid player.
So just to compare, sorry to interrupt you, Jaya, but just to compare, like, his contract versus a guy like Cam Payne who played great in the playoffs. So you signed Doug McDermott 3 years, $42 million, and you signed Cam Payne 3 years, $19 million. I personally, I think Cam Payne's a better player. But if you want to argue Doug McDermott is, that's fine. But $42 million to $19 million, I think that's a huge drop off. I think the Spurs just had money to burn. I really don't understand it. I was shocked. Out of all the teams, the Spurs ended up paying a guy that much money.
So you're saying the money is what shocked you the most?
Yeah, I mean, if he signed like a 1 year deal for, I don't know, $8-9 million, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But 3 years, $42 million, I was like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah, I understand that, but when you look at what Duncan Robinson is making, the league is really paying these top-notch shooters. Joe Harris got a big deal with the Nets. Duncan Robinson got his 5 years, $90 million with the Heat. So that just shows the value that the NBA and all these teams and general managers are putting onto three-point shooting. It's the main reason why guys like Nemanja Bjelica are still in the league. He just signed with the Warriors. Same reason like Otto Porter is still getting deals. All these guys can shoot from the three-point line, and that's just the value that they're putting on it. 3 years, $42 million, too big of a value probably, but that it's just because he's a good shooter in my opinion.
Going off on that, Brendan Forbes is coming back to the Spurs also, who is a very quality three-point shooter, as you saw against the Heat in the playoffs. He is going off throughout the whole season. So maybe they're changing it up a little bit, and they lost, you could argue, their best three-point shooter, who I'm going to be talking about right now, is an underrated signing in Patty Mills. He's going to the Brooklyn Nets, so I think that's going to be a huge signing for the Nets off the bench. I think he'll be playing great 6-7-man minutes. Him, Bruce Brown, probably off the bench. I think it'll be a great guard combo off the bench for both the Brooklyn Nets. So I think that's probably going to be the most underrated signing. It's only a 2-year, $12 million, I think, also dollar deal. So hopefully he'll be able to end his career off with some great years with the Brooklyn Nets, maybe a championship. So I think Patty Mills is the most underrated signing player. And for the cheap value that they're getting the Nets, I think it's great value.
Yeah, definitely a hot take. I mean, we could go on about this stuff all day, clearly. But honestly, when it comes to the money, I feel like you can never say, in my personal opinion, you can never say that any player was overpaid. You know, they were paid what the market allowed them to be paid. And a good agent is a good agent. I agree with Will. You know, three-point shooters, good shooters are definitely at the top of the market. Very, very valuable right now. So it will be very interesting just to see how all of this is going to play out. We're only in the second day of this free agency, so it'll just be good to see how this ensues and how these trades are going to play out in real time. But I think that is really all that we have for today's segment. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's Sports 2.0 show. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network down below. We'll go ahead and see you next time. Thank y'all for watching.